mean, building a startup's, not easy,
Mm.
right? Like, it's just not easy. Like, even with our app generator, it's not easy.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I am your host, Devin Miller, and I'm the serial entrepreneur as well as the founder of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with patents and trademarks. So we also like to tell the journeys of the different journeys that people take as they're getting going on startups and small businesses. And today we have a great guest on today, which is Carl Finch. He is a bit of a serial entrepreneur, or done a few different startups and small businesses. When I talked with him a bit before the episode, his short description was failure, failure, and more failure. But now we're going to move hopefully towards a success and learn from the failures. So welcome onto the podcast, Carl.
Thank you. Sorry, I was coughing. I caught a Skittle in my pipe, my windpipe.
That's all right. Sometimes Skittles will do that to you. So maybe I did a quick intro about you, but maybe more. You'll obviously do a better intro of yourself. So maybe tell everybody a little bit about yourself and backing up to the beginning of your journey and kind of what leads up to where you're at today.
Beginning of my journey started at age 12 when my grandfather handed me a computer because he thought I wasn't getting much work done as homeschooled. And I learned how to program in VB6 at that time, I believe. And then once high school came, I learned Java, and then college, C++ and C. And I've always been, kind of like a hacker that likes to tinker with code. And I got my first contract at age 19, got my first programming full-time job at age 22, worked as a software engineer, level 2 engineer, worked my way up contract to contract, then fell in the role of a lead architect at Wells Fargo, and then really felt that building rich corporation software that took advantage of people that needed help was no way to make a living, and felt spiritually good about yourself. So I decided to jump into the startup industry. And like you said, fail. But every time you fail, you learn a new lesson that you take on with your next startup, and your next startup either fails or succeeds financially, that is. Mm-hmm. But every startup that you build to completion and see to production, I see as a success. Maybe not a financial success like investors would like to see them as, but I see them as a success because you're on a journey to build a product and to help service a solution around a problem that you're solving to a niche market. And as long as you get it into production, to me, that's successful because you worked on a very difficult problem and you saw it to its completion. And that's successful in my eyes, in my perspective.
Sure. No, and I think that's a great intro. So maybe we can dive into that just a bit deeper. So grandpa gave you a computer when you were growing up, you got into apps, you got into development, into coding, went out and did that. And then you went over to Wells Fargo and did that for a bit of time. I think we talked about it was a bit of automation for some mortgage loan or the loan industry and whatnot. Decided that wasn't the right fit for you. And so you decided, hey, rather than keep working with a place that it's not good for me, or not, doesn't want it in the direction I want to go with life, you decided to go over to startup. So and I think you said your first startup was a Hippo Crows or what was it? Remind me what the name.
I'm wearing the shirt, Hippocrows.
Okay. So, and that one was doctors with medical records, if I remember right. So helping people to schedule appointments and transfer medical records and whatnot. So tell us, maybe just diving in. So you made the jump from big corporation to doing your own startup, and how did that first one go for you?
First, it was very exciting. And we were all excited and inspired to change the industry. And we thought we could because the technology had just just came about to where medical record systems that build EMR systems were just going online with their APIs.
Mm-hmm.
And so our concept was possible. We knew. We knew it could be built, even if it was just with 3 or 4 APIs at the time. And I believe we started with Wellmont, or I forget which API we started with, but we ended with Epic System, because they had an API system out there. It cost $15,000 a year to connect to, and we made the bet to pay that $15K, and we went to hospitals and we demonstrated, and we got shut down hard. We got shut down real hard. And that was the biggest lesson, that you may be building something that's inspiring, that's helpful, that solves a problem, but for whatever reason, the market doesn't want it.
And maybe to flavor that a little bit, if I remember when we talked before a little bit, it took about 3 years to build that. And then you guys kind of went out 6 months trying to meet with decision makers, get the product to the market, get customers and whatnot. And kind of after that 6 months journey, or, after that, it as you said, kind of got shut down hard, or you just weren't getting the traction that you wanted. Is that fair? Is that remember?
No, that's very fair. Well, we got shut down hard because in the medical industry, there's red tape that you have to cut through. And you have to get the doctors at the clinics to want to use your software, which we were able to convince a couple of doctors and clinics at Duke Hospital that they wanted to test it out. But then after you get by that red tape, you have red tape at the tech helm of that hospital and the administration office, and they all have to agree on it. And if anyone in that line disagrees with it, it doesn't go through. So there's just a lot of red tape in the medical industry. And, I should have had forethought about the red tape before getting in the industry, but I was just too excited, too hyped on the technology and the promise that it could make for that industry, and didn't care to do my due diligence, as it were to say, in building the tech and building the startup first. So
you get to that, and I think that's one. I think one takeaway is that you want to make sure, and I get the same way a lot of in the sense I do engineering and I do work with a lot of technology, and oftentimes you get very excited about the technology. Technology is awesome, it's great, it can do a lot of cool things, and yet you don't necessarily always go out and explore the market as well as you could or should, in the sense that just great technology doesn't always mean it will make a great product, or always people will sell it, and you can have the best technology. And I always you go back to back in the day, and if people remember, prior to DVDs, you had VHSs, you had Betamax, and were cassette tapes versus 8-track, and sometimes the technology is better, but if you can't make it go into the market, technology doesn't win the day. You have to have the good technology, but you have to check the fit. So when you get towards the end of that, 6 months of, because 3 years is a while to build. It's a lot of time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears. And then you go out, you try for 6 months, and you're just saying, hey, we're not getting the traction. We're hitting more red tape than we thought we would. People aren't adopting it. How did you make that decision? Okay, we're going to, after, putting a whole lot of time and effort into it, pull the plug, or decide to go do something else?
That became a question I had to solve. I had to ask myself personally, like, do I want to stay in this and get another 1,000 rejections before I get a yes 10 years down the road, or do I just want to jump the ship? It's all burning, and I don't want to catch myself on fire when this thing goes down. And I said at the end of the day, look, technology is great. At least we know what we want to build, or what industry we want to be part of. So let's just build something else. Let's be cool about it, and let's see where we go from there.
Okay.
And that's when we went on social media and said, hey, two co-founders have 10 years experience building systems. you give us an idea, we'll build the tech, and we'll come up with equity structure later. Throw us some ideas out there. And we didn't get one good idea. We got like, oh, how about Instagram but for cars? And I'm like, hey, how about going on Instagram and searching for cars and see what you find? And we didn't get any good ideas from that. But I threw them on my whiteboard in my garage, and I looked at them. And I said, there's an app, here somewhere that we can build. And my team member Chris was like, "You're crazy. These ideas suck. I mean, every app that you have listed up here, they've already been unicorn startups, and we're just being copycats, or we're being copycats in a very niche market that shouldn't even exist." Like Ashley Madison for Tinder, And I'm like, yeah, very immoral too, and unethical. And I couldn't build that. But anyways, that's how we came up with Avabot.
So before we dive in that just for a second, so diving into that just a little bit deeper. So you decided, hey, we're going out of the last startup. It didn't quite work out. We didn't get the traction we want. So rather, as a way to come up with new ideas, let's see what other ideas everybody else has out there, whether it's, Uber for massage therapists, I think you mentioned, or,
right.
Instagram for cars, which is already there. And so you kind of said, hey, what other good idea? Maybe other people have good ideas that we can work out something or help people to develop their dreams or their good ideas that they may not have time and resources, which nobody had. The people you threw it out to didn't have any good ideas, but you took that and you threw it up kind of on the whiteboard saying, okay, what's the commonality, or what are something that we can take all these bad ideas or ideas that are already out there, or ones that can implement and make something of it, or what are the commonalities? Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment. That's exactly what happened.
So you do that. Now you move on. So I didn't mean to interrupt by any means. You move on to now what you guys are doing today. So maybe give just a little bit of how you took all those ideas and decided to do or start what you guys are doing today.
Right. So we took all these ideas on a market board, and we looked at them, and we said, what are all these apps have in common? And what are all the apps that have already been built have in common? And, we said, well, a user logs in to the system and data is presented to them, and they can interact with that data if they wish. And they can add content to that community that's being created around the system. And that was the commonality we got out of all these apps, is that there's data being presented to a user, and that user can interact with that data, and they can modify that data and present to the community. And that was the number one thing we got out of all the apps, all the bad apps, all the good apps that were already out there, like Uber and DoorDash and stuff like that. And, we realized that, hey, maybe we could auto-generate an app. And, that was kind of the, light bulb moment for us, because we're like, no one, you can't auto-generate an app. And we try having people play devil's advocate for us. And like, I went to my mentor, Ronnie, who I thought would for sure play devil's advocate. I'm like, Ronnie, talk me out of this. We can't auto-generate apps in like seconds or minutes, can we? He's like, oh no, yeah, you can. I mean, you have to build it correctly, but yeah, you can do it. And I was like, I thought you were going to say no, and I'd just move on to the next idea. He's like, well, maybe this should be your next project. And he gave it to me as a bet to build. I said, build it. And we built a prototype of it in 2 weeks. We built just a little bash script in Linux that you just typed in commands, and it would generate C# at the time and ASP.NET Core views using Razor View Engine. And there was a little app that you could run once you deployed it to a server. And I'm like, that was easy. I did it in 2 weeks. He's like, yeah, but now you have to make it profitable. Now you have to get it ready for production. And that took a year and a half.
So, and if I were to unpack that just a little bit, so when you say auto generate, so let's say I had an idea for the world's best game, right? So I have Candy Crush 2.0 or whatever's the better,
Right.
game. So how does that work? So, let's use it somebody that has zero experience with the app and building it, and I just come and I can tell what I want to do and it'll magically make it? Or is it more for someone that has some experience and is wanting to then, put in some of the initial information or data or file and then have it auto generate? So who's kind of your market, or who's going to be the one to use your auto generation of the app?
As much as I would like it to be the former, it's actually the latter. It's people who are experienced, who have a MySQL database file or a schema file because they don't want us to steal their data, because I've gotten paranoid customers over that. But it's people who have a MySQL schema file and they want to build an app based off that schema. And we reverse, they upload it to our wizard and they press the magic button, and 3 seconds they have a download file to download. And all we're doing is reverse engineering that database, learning the how each table was built and what data columns are in each table. And we're just reverse engineering every table and creating CRUD operations in Node.js for those tables. Because at the end of the day, no matter you want to believe it or not, but every app out there is built off this same principle of you're talking to a database and you have to perform these CRUD operations on these tables within that database. And CRUD operations stands for create, read, update, and delete. It's an acronym.
Mm-hmm. So if you do that, and so the whole idea was basically, hey, a lot of apps are being made out there, a lot of developers, and this is kind of almost, a short circuit or, a shortcut in order to save a lot of the time that they don't have to go in and do a lot of what would be the structural stuff, foundational stuff. We can help them do that, and so that they can have that auto generated, save times, save money on development at the same time. But so how do you turn that as because you said what took the longer timer to the time that built it in 2 weeks, but the mentor and as well as yourself are looking at saying what makes it, or what's going to take the longer time is to make it profitable. So how do you now take that as from the idea of, hey, let's make it so for those that are no programming or doing some of that, we can auto generate a lot of the bare bones for the app, the structure of it. How do you make that profitable, or how did you go about figuring out how to make that profitable? Or are you still in that mode?
We're kind of still in that stage, but we use the lean startup methodology where we build the minimal viable product and then get 10 people online to test it out and give us their feedback. You have to start there, because if you can't get 10 people to use it for free, you're not going to get one person to buy it, pay their hard-earned cash to use it. But we tested it with system architects that we've had relationships with for like a decade, and we've tested it with engineers and investors that we've only known for a year or less, and we got multiple responses that were polar opposites of what we expected. We're like, some developers, some system architects who've been friends for us for 10 years, it was like, no, I mean, they're only going to come here once, scaffold the app, and then build it and polish it themselves and then publish it. So they're not going to want a monthly subscription. And then you got the investors and the engineers who are in like these boutique shops that focus on building apps for their customers, each week and each month, saying, no, if you do a monthly subscription and keep it on the cheap side, you're going to get a lot of these people signed up, and they're going to want to pay you $35 a month each month, because they're going to want to come back and generate their next project with you and their next project with you. And as long as you keep that monthly subscription low, you're going to have a high MRR and ARR at the end of the year that investors are just going to eat up. And so we said, well, can we make both these people happy? Because right now our business model was set up to make the system architect happy, where you just go in there once, pay for it, and you're done. But you're paying a high premium because it's a one-time service fee. And then it's like, well, sure, we can just use Stripe and set up a subscription paywall and make the investors happy. And then we just have a different wizard for them. So that's what we're working on now, is getting that ready so we can service both people and make them both happy. So that's what you want to do at the end of the day, is trying to make as many of your customers happy with as little modification to the code or your business as possible.
So, and that reminds me almost, one of my books that I recently read that's an interesting book is, it's on the genesis of Netflix, right? And so Netflix is obviously a subscription based where you pay each monthly, pay a fee each month, and you can either get it through streaming, and they still, for those of us that like DVDs, still do DVDs, right? But you did that, and they went through a little bit of the same thing, because when they started out, if you remember, and this is predates me a little bit, or at least my memory, I wasn't old enough to use it, but they started out as more selling DVDs, right? So it was either a one-off, kind of what you described, of, hey, well, somebody come in can buy a DVD. That time you didn't really have Amazon that was into DVD sales or other things, and you had those, one-off type of thing, which is almost what you're describing. Or we go all in with the monthly subscription and try and go more of the streaming route, right? So you can almost have subscription or selling DVDs as a one-off, and they slowly transition from what would have been a one-off to more of a subscription basis, which is where they're all now. You can't go on to Netflix anymore and even go buy DVDs, so to speak. So how do you make that idea? And so I think to one degree, you're right in the sense that whoever has the money is green. You try and make the customers happy. If you can suit both markets, why not? And on the other hand, sometimes it gets difficult to make a model that fits both, right? So sometimes it's hard to give a subscription where people like the subscription and also service the people that want a one-off. So how do you find that balance?
I think you have to do A/B testing and let the data tell you. Like, let the data tell you what you should do. Say my A test is one-off pricing, my B test is monthly subscription, and I shoot the software out there on the server and do A/B testing, and find that out of every 100 one-off services members come and pay one time, 99 of them are not coming back ever again. Versus 100 go to the B test, subscribe, and out of 100, 50 of them are coming back. Well, then it's obvious. B wins. Because at the end of the day, startups with business, money talks.
That it does. It always talks, and you always follow where the money is. So I think that's a good idea, is to almost look and say, okay, we got a few different ways of structuring our business. If we can service both, let's set it up to service both, and then see where the money goes, or who's the one that's, who are our regular most profitable customers, or how do we build a business around it, and then focus in on that. So I think that's a great idea. So now we are reaching the end of the podcast. And so I'm going to jump to my last couple questions that I always ask each time at the end of the podcast, which is, the first question is, so what was the worst business decision you ever made?
Hippocrates giving a sales rep that I wanted to hire 20% equity, making my decision not doing due diligence, but by just observing him and making a rash decision based off of him wearing a suit and a gold Rolex, and him talking a good game. Because when we got into the sales meeting at Duke Hospital and met with the CTO, guess who was completely quiet? And you have to do your due diligence when building a startup. And anytime you're adding an important role to a team, or giving a substantial equity or even responsibility to the project, you better do your due diligence, or you're going to make big mistakes, and you're going to have that debt carry out throughout the startup.
No, and I think that's a good point. I think sometimes hiring is always one where you're eager to get someone on, you think they'll make a difference. You're, overloaded, lots of things to do, not enough time to do it. And so you say, hey, this person will do a great job, and either bring them on, and whether it's a salary base or equity base or whatever, each time you bring someone on, it's a, especially as a startup and as a small group of people, they have a big impact on culture. And they're on, and especially if you give equity or you give ownership stake, whether they do their job or not, they have that a lot of times, that equity, and now you have to deal with that or figure out how to proceed forward or make sure that they actually will pull their weight. And some people do a great job and they're great hires and they're absolutely worth every month or every bit of equity you give them or money you pay them, and others aren't. So I think that's a good thing to do your due diligence. Oftentimes slow down on the hiring a little bit in order to make sure you're getting the right people, not just people on board. Okay. Absolutely. So the second question I always ask is, if you're to get someone that was just getting started or wanted to get started with a startup or a small business, just had an idea or just starting to develop it, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
Make sure you have patience, persistence, and perseverance to see it through.
And that being important because startups are going to take a lot of time, effort, sweat, a lot of ups and downs. And so you better a little bit buckle in and be ready for the ride. Otherwise, you're never going to make it.
Right. I mean, building a startup's, not easy, right? Like, it's just not easy. Like, even with our app generator, it's not easy because you have, the 5 pillars of the startup that you have to form, customer service, customer frequently asked questions, marketing pipeline, tech support, all that you have to build when you're building a product. And, even if you could get your tech built in 3 seconds or 3 days or 3 weeks, you still have to worry about the 4 other pillars of the startup. And so it's no easy task. So you have to be willing to buckle down and get through the hard times so you can, of your labor when it does start to become profitable.
No, I that's great advice. And so, and I think that everybody goes in, and a lot of times you have 1 or 2 areas of expertise or talents, and yet inevitably there are a lot of areas you have to cover. So you have to be willing to dive in, learn it, understand it, or find the people that make sense to bring it on, and then be willing to or put in that time and effort to do the other areas that may not be quite as fun or as exciting or as enjoyable as the thing that you really love the most. But in order to make it a successful startup, you have to be willing to dive in on all that. So I think that's great advice. Well, thank you for coming on. We're reaching the end of the podcast, and it's been a fun discussion to talk all about your journey and what you're doing. For those that want to reach out, they want to connect, or they want to get involved, either use your product or, be a subscriber or want to get involved or any other way, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/csfinch, or Twitter, twitter.com/csfinch, and our platform, startupco.io.
Perfect. We'll certainly make sure to put that in the show notes so people can find you, reach out to you, and if there's any connections to be made, make those connections. In the meantime, good luck with your journey. For those of you that are listening that are wanting to share your journey, we always welcome anybody to apply to the show. You can go to inventivejourney.com and apply to be a guest on the podcast. And for those of you that are looking for help as you start your startup to protect and grow with patents or trademarks, feel free to reach out to us, and we're always there to help. Thanks again for coming on. It's been a fun time to hear your journey. It sounds like it's one that has much more to come, and it'll be fun to see how it continues to go. So thanks again, and good luck with your journey.
Thank you, Devin.
Okay, well, have a good one.
You too.